This is the story of my crazy Canadian cousin.
Hey, how you doing? My name's Ted Schredd, and I made this little video just for you to, learn about the Shredder.
Ted grew up in the cold Canadian prairies and was on the path of getting a job and being like everyone else. Intuitively, he knew that this was not the path for him in life. He had to break free, and that is what he did. Schredd packed a suitcase and headed to the mountains to be a skiing videographer in the spectacular Rockies. While he was there, he learned how to be happy and how to really enjoy life. Schredd moved to Vancouver to ski and shoot in the winter, but when summer rolled around, he contracted himself out to be a frisbee instructor. In the summer of '92, Ted was inspired to ride a bicycle from Vancouver, Canada to San Diego, then east to Key West, north to Montreal, and back to Vancouver. When he returned, he wrote about his gigantic trip in his first book,
called The Cycling Adventures of Coconut Head, recounts Ted and Deanne's experiences on the road. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a very interesting couple of people, Ted Schredd and Deanne Couple.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Agree or Disagree, the podcast. It is I, your host, Kevin Olenek. You can follow me on Twitter at KEVOLE. You can also add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. Like Agree or Disagree, the podcast on Facebook as well. Also subscribe on YouTube, Kevin Olenek. Speaker.com, KEVOLE is where you get all the podcasts. You can also subscribe on iTunes, Agree or Disagree, the podcast. And I'd like to ask by starting you as the audience member a question. How much fun is your life? At the end of the day, and not to sound too morbid, but when people look back on your life, is the life that you are currently living, by your own definition, fulfilled? Or, as I mentioned earlier, taking it one step further, is your life fun? My guest today has put full focus on these two things. He's been an adventure announcer, corporate speaker, restaurant photographer. He has cycled from Summerland to Los Angeles. He did traffic reports on his bike. He interviewed Leslie Nielsen. He was the host of and producer of the Morning Breakfast Show. And of course, the author of books The Cycling Adventures of Coconut Head, as mentioned in the video, and Gramma Knows the F Word. Ted Schredd's third book, SmartAss Buddha, Get Inspired and Pass It On, is about finding one's inspiration and retaining that inspiration. SmartAss Buddha shows us, you and us, how to instill your own systems for inspiration and makes easy for readers to stay spiritually aroused. And we welcome Ted Schredd from On Agree or Disagree, the podcast. How are you?
I'm great, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for. And where are you? You showed me your on Skype fine background. Where are you right now?
I'm hanging out in an apple orchard in the top of the hills in Kelowna.
Oh, and I'm in Kamloops, so I can almost wave to you from where I am.
I can see the view.
Yes, I can see the view as well. Apparently, we're rivals. I didn't know that until I moved here. But apparently, Kamloops and Kelowna are rivals. We're like angry at you or something.
Okay, I won't be angry at you though.
I see no reason, but I think Kamloops and Kelowna can get along here. This may be a weird way to start this, but reading your profile, the first question that popped in my head was, what was your childhood like? Because the reason I ask is very clearly you have a unique talents and some unique gifts that in our era, and I'm assuming that we grew up pretty close in the same era, they weren't received with a lot of applause necessarily or understood always. So I'm curious, were you always a risk taker? Did that develop?
I think, it's really interesting because I sort of had the opposite of support when I grew up, and my mother was always extremely supportive of me. I'm the last of 6 kids, and pretty well everyone else has been against me. And I think their intentions are good, but they all wanted me to sort of fit into what they thought I should do, as opposed to encouraging me to be my own individual. And I think the really big shift happened for me when I was 18. I went to Lake Louise, Alberta, to be a ski bum, and instead of learning how to ski, I learned how to live life, because suddenly I was surrounded by people that put joy and happiness as their number one mission. And, people didn't watch TV. They didn't care about your background. They didn't care what kind of music you liked or what group you belonged to or what political affiliation. Their only concern was, do you want to go have fun? No? Okay, I'll go talk to someone else. And there was quite a few moments where I was always impressed by the parties because they would invite everyone. So even the crazy dishwasher or whatever it was always included in what was going on. And that was so different for me growing up in Edmonton, where it was very cliquey and different people and different ideas were either knocked down or, they wanted to fight with someone or whatever. And when I got to Lake Louise, I'm like, oh my goodness, you can actually enjoy yourself every single day. And I was like, I'm in.
It's amazing how getting out of one community and into another community can inspire and change something within you.
Yeah, and I think, too, that once you have been provoked with possibility in your mind, that you see other people do it and you see that it's possible, and they're not any smarter than you or better than you. It's just, you need to have that spark of possibility within yourself. And if you nurture that spark, then you can go do whatever you want. And we tend to focus on why things won't work instead of how can I make this work.
What's the difference there between between those two mindsets?
I think, this is part where inspiration comes in. And, when you're inspired to do something, obstacles seem smaller. You have more energy to challenge these obstacles. They don't, like, every log on the path doesn't knock you down. You just sit down for a second. It's like, okay, how am I going to get over this path? And so that's why I wrote about inspiration, because it's like, you can take a vacuum cleaner and if you can move the vacuum back and forth, but if it's not plugged in, you're just wasting your time. And inspiration is that electricity that drives you to keep going when you're starving, when you're having problems. And I think it's so critical to not only train your mind to think in positive ways, but to create positive habits and to surround yourself with people that are truly interested in you being you. You don't have to, and sometimes people think inspiration, I've got to go climb Mount Everest, or no, it could be you like knitting stuff and selling it at the market. It's like whatever makes you happy. And there's no right way or wrong way of doing this. It's really about what's important to your heart and then pursuing that as you go through life. And some days will be good and some days will be bad. But if you always sort of, I guess, never give up, then eventually you're going to arrive at your destination. And if not, you're having a good time while you're going.
Yeah. And sometimes and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later too, but sometimes where you think you'll land isn't where you originally thought you would land, isn't where you're going to land, but it may end up being better than what you originally thought. And that's the power of that inspiration.
Yeah, and I'm also a big believer in flow. And when things are going really smoothly and you meet the right people and things just line up, then you know you're on the right path. And whether you have inspiration or not, life will always be challenging. Nobody gets off scot-free. And inspiration is kind of like having a superpower in your backpack that helps you go down the path. And I just want to give one example that happened today, which was so hilarious. So I went to the Chamber of Commerce networking meeting last week, and I met a very nice lady, and we met for lunch today. And when we parted, I said, "Oh, we should go for a hike sometime or a bike, go for a bicycle run." She goes, "Oh, I don't have a bicycle." And I said, "Oh, one will show up." And 15 minutes later, someone gave me a Specialized mountain bike. That is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. That was my day today.
That's crazy. Wow.
And when you're venturing out, you have to use your awareness to pay attention to the little details of whether you're stuck or it's moving forward or something intrigues you. And always your intuition will guide you to the little places that you need to be. You just have to listen to it.
One such example on your profile that you talked about is in Lake Louise. You were making holiday videos, and you decided, or after someone told you that nobody wants to have videos of themselves on vacation, yeah, that person is probably banging themselves on their head right now because they lost a lot of millions of dollars. What made you think Vancouver was the option?
Vancouver was the option because it was a moment I was just sitting at the bus on Granville, and it was February, and it was a pretty nice day, and someone was playing harmonica, like a live blues player, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this where do you get to listen to live blues at the bus stop? And it was that moment that I said, great, I'm going for it. And I'm also not a huge fan of cold weather, and it was a little warmer in Vancouver. I remember playing Frisbee at Stanley Park in February in my shorts, and I'm like, wow, these places exist. And after, years of growing up in Edmonton and minus 30 or 35 for weeks on end, I'm like, bye-bye.
Yeah, no, that's kind of funny because it's not just recently. I came out from Kamloops. I lived in Vancouver, of course, for a few years to move to study broadcasting. So it's kind of, I relate to you, especially the shorts part in February, January, and, wearing shorts now. So, while they're complaining in Alberta on my Facebook about cold, which, too bad for them. But then you never, it's what is, it feels like for you, you relied on something that your instincts a lot. It seems to be, would that be correct in that assessment that you trust your instincts?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the other part of that is trusting your instincts. And I think I've also always come from the school of thought, well, try it. If I don't like it, I can change. And I think sometimes people get scared in the trying. And it's one of the stories at the start of the Buddha book where my brother passed from brain cancer at 47, and I was 41 at the time. And it seemed like his last few months was that he was overwhelmed with regret. And I just can't imagine being on my last moments and my memories or my thoughts are based on regret instead of enjoying what I've done. And I realize I can't do everything, but I'm going to try whatever I can, whenever I can. And it's just, I don't know, I think you just got to give yourself permission to enjoy your life. And I know it sounds kind of corny that way because people are like, well, I do enjoy my life. And it's like, yeah, but I've seen you driving in traffic and you're yelling and angry all the time. And you're not, they give it away when you talk to them. When you meet a happy person, it's pretty hard for them to hide it. They kind of beam. And there's no reason why people should not be seeking happiness. I can't see anything more important than seeking happiness. And it doesn't have to be like a selfish happiness, because that happiness may be raising your children, maybe helping in the community. But you need to kind of push that happiness over and above trying to impress the Joneses or having the best carpet in your house or any of those other things. And now all of my efforts are around enjoying myself and helping other people enjoy themselves.
And I think that what limits people from living that life of happiness that I think you've captured is stress. And, the feeling of getting that carpet and keeping up with the Joneses and the current economic situations, and I have to get my kid to this or whatever. There's a bunch of stuff that the list can go on and on. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. What is the difference of how do you personally handle stress?
As soon as I start to identify things that are stressing me out, then I'll change gears and reevaluate and say, what am I doing? What is the value of this? Is this amount of stress valuable to me? And like, for one thing, I did live radio and live television, but it's extremely stressful. And I mean, yes, it's fun. But it's not, I like no stress, like zero stress. And I'm always striving for zero stress. And sometimes we get it financially. Sometimes we get it emotionally. Sometimes we get it health-wise. And, if you're experiencing stress through health, then maybe you need to reevaluate what you're eating, how much exercise you're doing, how you're spending your time. Maybe you watch too much TV. It's so different. And I'm not here to tell anybody what's right or what's wrong. It's about you taking the time to reflect and evaluating every once in a while. Hey, is this working out for me? Am I happy? And I think sometimes people are even scared just to ask that question because they won't like the answer. So they keep busy. Sometimes alcohol plays a role in that to sort of cover up those feelings. And it's like if your only excitement in life is saying, thank God it's Friday, then you really need to reevaluate where you're going, because at the end of the day, are you going to be okay with what you've done in your life? And, another thing too is like people get to retirement and they don't really know how to enjoy themselves, and then they get bored and depressed. And it's like, man, if I'm going to be fun, I'm going to practice, get really good at it.
Yeah. Before we do the travel part, I'm trying to picture this conversation that you may have had with a general manager that at Chorus, that you said, okay, I'm going to do traffic, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I know that you could use a helicopter or you could use, other systems, but I'm going to ride my bike in Vancouver and cover traffic that way. How did that happen?
Well, I really wanted to be in radio, and I didn't want to go to school, and I didn't want to work in the middle of some little town somewhere to earn my chops. And so I made like a 30-page presentation of the cost breakdown of what it costs to run a helicopter and what it costs to run a cyclist. And peanut butter sandwiches are way cheaper than jet fuel. And Brad Phillips was the program director at Z95 in Vancouver. And like 3 pages into my huge presentation, he says, great, let's do it. And I'm like, what? Really? And So went out and did that, and it was a huge hit. And still, that was 1993 to 95. I had 3 people this week still remember that gig, however many years ago that is. I'm out in Kelowna, not in Vancouver, and people are like, oh yeah, I used to listen to you. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. And my thing with on the bike too was, I really get frustrated at the environmental movement when they're kind of badgering you and making you feel bad. And it's like I feel inspiration is so much more powerful to inspire them. And I thought, if I can ride my bicycle 50 to 75 clicks in a morning and beat you in traffic, that might get a few people riding their bike, or at least get the people driving their cars maybe not want to try and run the people off the road on their bicycles, because they're doing their part. And I it's a little frustrating in Vancouver because there's, big fights over the bike lanes and loss of driving space. And I wish that people looked at cyclists like, wow, there's a guy who's given up his car to not pollute, and I should maybe admire that and give him a little bit of applause.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a unique way. And, we still, even 25 years later, and the advancements that we've made in terms of cycling, this is sort of a total tangent, but I think an important tangent, we haven't really made a lot of progress in terms of permission for, there's still a long way to go. We've made some progress, but there's still probably a long way to go that we can still improve the cyclist way of travel.
Yeah, and I mean, City Council in Vancouver kind of upset a lot of people with the bike lanes they did, but you got to start somewhere. You got to make space for people to ride the bikes. I'm pretty impressed in Kelowna. They've got a lot of bike lanes. I find most of the drivers are pretty good, and it's just going to take time. And I was just out for a ride today and coming up the hill. And there was another gentleman, he was retired, 65 plus. And we were just talking about, I exercise because it gives me mobility to see things that I wouldn't be able to see, or to do hikes or adventures that I couldn't do. And other people at my age can barely get up and down the stairs because, for whatever reason, their health isn't that good. And to me, health isn't about how I look. It's about what it gives me the opportunity to do, and how I feel, and that I can move a ton of bricks around, or logs or chop wood or whatever. And I'm very, very thankful every time I go up a hill, even though I'm out of breath, that I can do it.
So how often are you still a person that travels on your bike now?
Yeah. I usually have a bicycle. I go all over the place. I've got a bicycle in Tucson. I've got one in Portland. I've got one in Edmonton, and I just got a free one today in Kelowna. And it's cheaper than shipping them around, but I always try to go by bicycle, buy my groceries by bicycle, weather permitting, to do meetings. And, at a stage when you're doing business, sometimes you think people will judge you because you're not in a suit driving a BMW. And I'm like, I don't care. I am who I am, and I ride my bike, and I ride it everywhere, and I feel great, and I'm in good health, and I got good cardio, and I'm just thankful every single day that I have those things, because they're not going to be there every day forever.
It's true. So I feel like I'm a little bit all over the map in a sense, but there's so much to talk to you about. Kind of tell us some of your adventures about your bike, your cycling trips. Geez, I can't talk all the time. Key West. I'm a radio podcaster or something. Cycling trips. Kind of talk a little bit about some of those adventures. What did you learn about the people, and what did you learn about yourself? I always find when people do these big traveling adventures, there's some really good self-discovery stuff that you learn. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think probably the number one thing, I'll just give you the trips that I've done. So I did the, Summerland to Los Angeles. In 92, 93, I cycled Vancouver, San Diego, Key West, Montreal, and back. And then I did Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, and Britain. And probably the number one lesson that I got is that when you have a big project, even if you got a headwind, all you can do is put your head down and keep pedaling. And eventually you'll get there. So when I'm writing books, it's a big project, but I'm like, you know what, just put your head down and pedal today. That's all you can do is pedal. So it gave me confidence on really big projects. I guess the second biggest thing for me is kindness of strangers. And until you kind of put yourself into a position that you need to rely on strangers that you don't really know. And sometimes you have to make yourself vulnerable for that to happen. And one of my most favorite lessons in that is I'd cycled down to Portland to visit a high school friend. And he was staying with Tammy, his roommate. And just as we were leaving, she came down and gave me $100 because she had found out that I didn't have a camera. And she thought it was really important that people saw pictures of this big adventure we were on. And not only was she a single mother, which made it kind of special that she gave me that money, but she was 100% blind. And so here's the most amazing example of unconditional giving, where she would never see a picture ever in her life. And she gave out this $100 for other people. And that changed me so much, and had people completely rebuild my bike. And when I got back from that trip, it was like I was trolling for people to be kind to. And I'd find a touring cyclist and I'd bring them to my house and I'd feed them and I'd get their bikes fixed. And I'd just do everything that I possibly could. You need some dental work? What do you need? You know, kind of thing. And it completely changed me as a person. I have no problem giving to people. And even if they somewhat, you know, however you want to word it, kick me in the face or don't appreciate it, I'm totally good. It's like, whatever, all good, you know. And I think that the more that we can reach out for kindness, even within our own communities, of taking a pie to the neighbors or offering maybe a senior citizen some help with the lawn or mowing or shoveling the snow or whatever it is. And now, like in the old days, it used to be, you're supposed to give because you give 10% as the church, and if you don't, somebody's going to be mad at you. And now I give just for the sheer fun of it. It's probably my most enjoyable habit, is just giving stuff to people, and especially if they really need it. And you can just walk in and give it to them. You know, whether it's someone forgot their wallet at the grocery store, buy the groceries, or just whatever it is, you know, and it's really fun. And I'm also a big believer in karma, and whatever you put out, you get back. And today was just a great example with this bicycle. I just can't believe. I mean, I can't believe it. And it's always so rewarding when it happens.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, very true. And it's funny that you talked about kindness, because we just had that conversation almost to the week with former Calgary City Councillor Brian Pincott. Talked about the power of empathy and kindness and how we need that more, because we're talking about men and mental health and how that needs to be. And it's so kind of funny, the connection to that, because it is important, and it is something I think, and you get the sense that with, especially on social media, there's a lot of anger and frustration and angst, and it's just, there needs to be, there's this undercurrent of like, it's just time to add kindness to this conversation, and it's just to, you know, to split. It's almost like there's like a, okay, I think it's time we need some kindness because the way we're living now isn't working. Kind of breathe out sort of sense. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but.
Well, and it's, you know, I get, okay, great, Christmas, and we get food for the homeless and all that. Okay, great. What about the other 51 weeks of the year? Do we stop being kind just because it's not Christmas? I mean, to me, it's ridiculous. And that we should be kind and compassionate every single day, not because our religion preaches it or because it's that time of year. It's just like, if there's a massive disaster, amazing things happened with the fires in Fort McMurray and all the different fires that have happened. And people, like little kids having lemonade stands and raising hundreds of dollars or whatever. It's just like, why not just do that all the time? Why do we need a reason? And within different communities, when there's a new couple and they get married, sometimes they'll end up with like $100,000 at their wedding to help them start their life, and sometimes we just got to take a step back. It's like, do I really need that Escalade? Or could I get like a $10,000 vehicle and then have like $50,000 to go have fun with?
So what is your approach to money? It seems really, it comes across to me that you have a very generous spirit. What is your approach to money?
Can you maybe give me a little clarification on that? In what direction?
Is it do you live? Do you feel like you live frugally? Do you that with your adventures, have you learned to be more frugal and travel and set aside stuff? And it's like, you know what, I'm going to spend a good chunk of my budget, whatever it is, about thinking about how I can invest that into the community.
Yeah, I think so. Going back to the ski days, there was a girl named Lori who was a server at the Lake Louise Inn. And when it comes to off season up in those ski areas, there, people don't get a lot of hours. There's not a lot of tourists. And so they're all hurting. But Lori was always like going to Japan or on a cruise ship or whatever. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? How come you have money? She goes, it's easy. I don't go buy meals at restaurants. I don't buy lattes. I don't buy beers, and it's just, where's your priority? And I think it's absolutely hilarious listening to someone tell me they don't have money to go to Mexico or wherever it is, but they go out for meals. They go and get a $5 latte and a $3 muffin, and then they go out for lunch, and maybe they go out for dinner. And most of the fun masters, and this is, learning from other people, is they never go out to restaurants. And if they do, it's a special occasion, not because they're being lazy. They'll buy things secondhand if they can. They don't need the newest iPhone. And so it really means reflecting on where you spend your money and then saying, is this where I want to spend my money? And, if you buy a latte a day, which doesn't really seem like a very big thing, that's $1,500 a year. There's your trip to Mexico, And when I go on vacation, I make a point of taking it easy with my money, integrating with the locals. When I was down in Guatemala, my friend Berna there, he had a restaurant, and they really didn't know what was going on. And I helped them. I did all their menus and redesigned some dishes and did all the photography and told them how to serve 3 plates at once and what customer service was. And they just didn't have an example around them to learn from it. Now, Berna will not even let me pay for accommodations or food, even if I go for 3 months. He will not take a cent. And so it's kind of where your priorities lay. For example, spending $500 or $300 on a concert ticket. Are you kidding me? I can buy the entire CD library and still have $150 left over. But maybe music to you is worth it. So I'm not saying that that's a bad experience, but people have recurring charges on their phone bill. They could turn the heat down, so they save a few $100s on the heat. Have better insulation, wear a jacket. I mean, if you want to find money, you will find it. And when you learn how to enjoy your life, mostly everything I do is free. Hiking, free. Bike riding, basically free. Visiting with people, free. Going to the beach, free. And I just don't see the value of it. If I have $1,000, I can go for 2 days or 3 days at a fancy hotel in Vancouver, but I can go for 2 months and live in Tucson, Arizona, and, rent a place, cook my own meals. And it's like, do you want to do 3 days at the fancy suite, or do you want to do 2 months of sunshine in the middle of winter? So it's really a personal reflection on where you're spending your money and what you're doing. Like, for example, cable TV. Most fund masters that I met do not watch TV. They do not have cable. Cable's what? I don't even know, like 125, 150 a month. So it's $1,500 a year again. And there's tons of free stuff on the internet. You don't need to sit in front of the TV. You're totally wasting your life. You could be learning guitar. You could be talking to your friends, hanging out with your kids, whatever is important to you. And I'm not saying, again, that TV is a bad thing, but if that's what you're doing all the time and you're miserable, you can't be wondering, why am I miserable?
Fair. What got you into writing?
Mama Schredd. So I was about to go on this bicycle trip to Key West, and I'm like, Mom, you got any words of advice for me? And she says, keep a journal. And so I kept a journal, and I also started a little newsletter to fund the trip. So when we met people, give us $20 and we'll mail you some updates. And I did little cartoons in it. And so it arose out of my mom saying, keep a journal, because we had all these crazy things happen to us. And it's so personally rewarding to run into someone who's read the book, the first, the bicycle book, and said, you know what, because of you, I decided to ride my bike across U.S. or whatever. Whereas radio and TV, when I did it, it's a one-off. You go on the air, and then it disappears into the ozone. And it's a little different now with podcasts, which is fantastic, so that, we can do this and people can listen to it a bazillion times. Whereas in 1992, 93, 94, 95, there was no internet. There was no such thing. So I find it partly laziness in the sense that I do it once and it's done, and people can enjoy it for years and years to come.
Before we get to your third book, what inspired the first two? Like, what was it about?
The first one was just an epic adventure, and I just got the rights back from Whitecap Books, and so I've republished it and put a few of the naughtier stories that weren't allowed at the time. But it was just, I had an agent and I got a contract, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. The second book, Gramma Knows the F Word, I think sometimes I write books so I can illustrate them because I love illustrating so much. And they're just cheeky little cartoons. They're nothing fantastic. But I just saw a hole. There was no books on fun or how to have fun. And now there's tons of books on happiness and how to be happy. But I think they kind of get too deep into it. Fun and happiness is really simple. You just choose. You choose it, and everything else will fall into place. And if you're trying too hard to be happy, you're missing the point.
Tell us about your third book. Tell us about the Smiling Buddha. Or the Smiling Buddha. Not the Smiling Buddha. Do not tell us about that, but tell us about SmartAss Buddha.
It's okay. My friends call it the Badass Buddha and everything else. I don't get too hung up with people getting things perfect. The SmartAss Buddha is this book on inspiration, and life is just more challenging if you're not inspired. And I haven't, I've been reading self-help for a long time, and whether it's Anthony Robbins or Brian Tracy or Eckhart Tolle, they all kind of seem a little too serious for me. And I think, like with the word inspiration, it's a universal word. But if you take, let's say, Christians, they may speak of the Holy Ghost or feel the Spirit of the Lord, or however they describe it. And you go to hippies and they're talking about chakras and whatever. And so if you say to hippies, do you feel the spirit of the Lord? They think you're crazy. And if you go to the church people and you tell them about chakras, they think you're crazy. But it's the same thing. It's inspiration, that feeling of being alive and spiritually aroused. And so I chose the word inspiration specifically, hopefully to go across all those lines. And without inspiration, it's just hard. And when you meet an inspired person, I just was in at the Terry Fox run and in Kelowna here, and Terry's brother was there. And one of my favorite stories in this book is who inspired Terry Fox. Terry Fox is such an inspirational character. Who was it? And the night before his leg was to be amputated, he read about an amputee. He was the first amputee to run the New York Marathon. His name is Dick Traum. And so Dick, did this marathon, and then Terry was inspired to do his own marathon, or his own really big marathon. And so he went out and did that. And, Terry Fox runs are in 40 countries. They've raised over $500 million. There's millions and millions of people that go out and either run or walk or whatever. And that was all inspired by Dick Traum. Now, Dick didn't go into the New York Marathon saying, I'm going to inspire people in 40 countries and raise $500 million because that's what I'm doing. He just did his thing. And when people just do their thing, it touches every single person that they come in contact with, whether it's your family or your coworkers or your friends or strangers. And the power of inspiration is highly underrated, I think, in the whole aspect of the self-help movement, because without inspiration, it's going to be a slog, no matter which way you go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's true, right? Because I totally can understand that. I feel you there, because I mean, I have times of slog too, no question. But yeah, it's just that natural, like just living life naturally. I think does it connects more than I'm trying to inspire you. When it just feels a little bit like preachy in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the name that I chose, the SmartAss Buddha, is just someone who's figured out their happiness on their own terms. They didn't need to do Oprah, and they didn't, need to do the South Beach diet or whatever it is. I mean, whatever works for you, it doesn't really matter. But a SmartAss Buddha is just someone who's figured out their thing, because it could just be a farmer that loves taking care of his chickens, and he's just the happiest guy ever because he loves his chickens. It's like, good for you, man. And when you break it down, I believe that everybody is a SmartAss Buddha in some context, in the sense that we're smart. We all can teach each other something. Even that homeless person can teach you something. It can teach you patience, can teach you compassion. Everyone is better than you at something. When it comes to the ass part, is that we can all be a jerk from time to time. No one is free of being a jerk. And when you understand that, it makes you a little more compassionate and understanding of the people around you. And then the Buddha is that we all, Buddha represents enlightenment. And this is not necessarily a Buddhist book. I just sort of cherry picked some of the principles of Buddhism that work for me. And I encourage people to find philosophies. There's tons of wisdom in the Bible. There's tons of wisdom in the Quran. There's tons of wisdom in Buddhism. There's tons of wisdom in kids that have made their living through skateboarding. You know what I mean? It's all around you. And when you start to focus on the inspiration, then it really becomes this pattern of what you see all the time. And today, the lady, Jennifer, that I met for lunch, I wanted to talk to her because she works at WorkSafe BC, and her job is to help retrain people who have been injured into a totally different industry. So they can no longer be mechanics, so they need, something else. And her job is to inspire these people to think differently. And to me, that's really an admirable, amazing skill that she has. And I don't think I could do it. I don't know if I'd want to do it, but I can certainly grab some juice from it, you know?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be in your field. Well, a person like you has several fields, but it doesn't have to necessarily be in your specific field. What it is kind of like, even me, like the stuff I do, I feel like I get that inspiration it's kind of weird. I get it from anywhere, and it's like, oh, that person said something there and it just clicks and I feel like we need to talk about that. And there was nothing in there. There was something, it just connected with me.
Yeah, there's another one that comes to mind. I was up in Edmonton visiting my mom. She's in a home, and I was out by the door, and there was a lady coming through, and she had a walker, and she was almost bent over, at 90 degrees over the walker, and she's going out for a walk, and I say, "Good morning." And she goes, "Good morning." I'm like, "How are you doing?" She said, "I'm great." Just having a blast, just barely able to move. And I'm like, man, I love people like that. I love seeing people that are much older than me on a bicycle, out walking, and they're just like, you know what? I'm just gonna have fun. And the rest of you, if you want to bitch and moan, go ahead. I'm going out there. And the other thing about people that inspire you or are inspired, they're very easy to talk to. They love to encourage other people. And so when I go to any kind of function in a room, I immediately go for the brightest, happiest person in the room and talk to them, because I know I won't be disappointed.
Yeah. That's good. So this term spiritually aroused, it's been kind of ringing in my head a bit since I've read it. What does that mean to you?
Well, I didn't want to use inspiration over and over and over and over again, so I needed to come up with another term. And I kind of feel like inspiration, the root is in spirit, and when someone's inspired, they're full of spirit, they're full of life. Their spirit has been aroused. And that's where it is. There's something that's been triggered within them that has got them thinking more than their day-to-day routine. They're thinking outside the box. Maybe they want to try an activity, or they want to move to a different geographical location. And it's spiritually aroused is, I guess, really just another term for inspiration, but it also sounds kind of naughty, so I kind of like that.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah. I'm intrigued, but yet should I be? I feel evil. I'm going to hell now. Yes. Oh no.
Well, it's like the Gramma Knows the F Word book, and F stands for fun. And I remember being at a book signing in Abbotsford, and a couple of people were really upset with me using the F word. And I'm like, man, F stands for fun for me. I don't know what it stands for you. That's your issue, man.
Hey, if your mind is in the gutter, it's your mind in the gutter, and it's not my fault. I'm just stepping back here, kind of thing.
Well, and I've realized that there's some people that are just going to be miserable no matter what. Yeah. And there's, when my brother passed so early, it made me realize that I have a finite number of heartbeats left in my life. And it was the first time that was crystal clear to me. And so now I look at every single heartbeat is so valuable. And if I am running into a situation where it's a person or whatever, and you're wasting my heartbeats, it's so easy to walk away. It's like, you know what? I got way better things to do with my time than talk to someone who is not interested in listening, or they want to push their agenda on me, or they want to lecture me about something. I'm like, you know what? I'll see you later. And once you begin to understand that you do have a finite number of heartbeats, and you may make it to 75 or 80 or 95, but you might get taken out by a tree tomorrow. And that's just the way life is. And if you think that you're going to wait for some later date to enjoy yourself, you've sold yourself a bill of goods.
Yep. Do it now. It's, those milestone things that people talk about too. I'm hitting the big O, whatever the O is, and then, just do it now. Do it now.
Well, and, there's lots of great stuff that shows up on Facebook with people, like 100-year-old marathon runners or push-ups or whatever. Inspiration is everywhere. You just got to look.
One of the things that also is what I'm hearing and observing from the way you live your life, and it's not an easy word to talk about, but it's coming across, and I have to ask. You seem very, with all of the talk of fun and how you live your life, you have developed also, it seems to me that you've developed a discipline in how you've lived your life, in your terms of your choices, in terms of like, well, I'm going to choose not to have cable because I believe that I can have adventure here. I'm going to, making these choices, making a choice of saying no so you can say yes to something else. How was that? How did that develop? How have you struggled with it, and how have you refined it?
Well, and I can honestly say I'm not, a really rich person financially, but I'm rich in experience. And I guess, it's like understanding that if I want to be a doctor, I've got to make a certain amount of sacrifices financially or mentally or emotionally to be that doctor, and that's the end result. And for me, going on these big trips, it's like, okay, I am not going to spend a single cent when I go out. And so I'm going to save that money, and I'm going to use that ticket money to get a ticket to go to Tucson or wherever I go. And once you start to remove all the ridiculous expenses that kind of take your money, whether it's a big home and you could live in a smaller home, or, do you really need a $50,000 or $60,000 vehicle, or do you need a $10,000 one? It gets really easy to make those choices. And I think as far as the discipline goes, I know exactly what I want, and I know exactly how much it costs. And it's not like some fluffy dream. It's I'm going to do it, so it makes it very easy to make those choices. And it's not always easy. I mean, I've had times where, I am working on a project, like when you write books, you don't make money for a long time doing it. And, that was fast day when I was fasting, because I thought, I don't really have any food. Well, let's just call it a fast. Okay, today I am fasting, right? But I think it's clear priorities is really, what it is, Kevin. And once you have, it's like, with your children, I don't have children myself, but for parents, I find it very admirable that they're very clear on those choices or the options that they want to have for their children. And that is totally admirable, but they have this clarity of their time. So like, for example, one of my friends, Ken, he has 2 kids, and he's a busy business guy. And he had a rule that he never missed a soccer, volleyball game ever. It did not matter where he was. It was not optional. And I'm just so admired him for that, because he'd drive me crazy. I'd have something that I wanted him to attend. He's like, yeah, I'd love to, but, I got to go watch baseball or whatever. But he would schedule the entire season into his calendar as soon as he got it from the kids. And then it was not up for negotiation. Now his adult children are amazing, and he's in Portugal right now with his daughter, and it's just, they're both their favorite travel buddies, and they go all over the world with each other. And Ken's 59 and his daughter's 26, and it's just great. So it's really, I think when you're talking about that, it's choosing your priorities.
For sure. Yeah. And what about, before we dig into the book here a little bit and how the book has been doing, what about the power of community? How's that helped you?
So I'm also a big believer in mentors and mentoring other people. And I think it's, in some cultures or, years gone by, the blacksmith would mentor someone so there would be a new blacksmith or, whatever it is. And I've been so lucky with photography and business and life, and I probably have just about 10 mentors that I can call upon to help me. So one of them, Nick Didlick, is one of the top photographers in the world. He's won top news photographer photo of the year. I shouldn't say of the year, of all time, in the top 60. So, but Nick, I can phone him up anytime, and I'm like, Nick, I'm shooting this. What do I do? And he'll mock me, because that's what he does, and then he laughs and he tells me what to do. And the value of that is, to have a world-class photographer at the touch of a phone to help me out is amazing. But you've got to earn those mentorships, so that if people do mentor you, you've got to do what you got to say, and you've got to go back to them and show them how their help is helping you. And so I've always made a point of all of my mentors, making sure I'm always thankful to them and always keep them up to date as to how their help is helping me. And so now, anytime, like with the restaurant in Guatemala, it was just my pleasure to mentor Berna. And I've just got a young kid who's doing my sales copy for me. And I'm just so excited. Not so much that he can help me, but I can help him learn about business and being on time and hitting deadlines and doing what you say you're going to do, and under promising and over delivering. And I just think that there's lots of room to mentor people besides your kids or, your family, and to do it nothing more than to help another soul find their way.
True. Yes. So tell us about the progress of the book. How has it been doing? Where can people find it? What's been the journey that has happened since you said publish and it's out there and people are able to read it? How has that journey been?
Oh, it's been really interesting. Amazon has been probably the biggest source of stress that I've experienced since live television, when I got left hanging on the air when there was a fire drill and the entire studio was evacuated and I was live on location until further notice. But I was going to launch last year, and they lost all the books, so I decided not to launch. And then I went to launch this year because I wanted to go out over the summer. And I had 18 days of tech support just to get my ebook up. And so there was an awful lot of resistance. But Amazon, if I sell an ebook on Amazon, they take 30% of the cover. 70% on my ebook. They take 70%.
Wow.
And so I'm right now currently strategizing to redo that so that this big corporation is not taking 70% of the money from me. So right now the book's at Amazon, and it will be up, so you can order it through your bookstore, or you can email me off the website smartassbuddha.com. So I'm just starting out, and it was a huge source of stress for me, so I kind of resigned to it. And it's like, you know what, I'm going to do it TED style. I'm just going to take it one interview at a time, and if it takes me 5 years to promote it, I'm fine with that, because it was starting to be opposite of everything that I was trying to teach in the book. And I feel so much better for it. And being in Kelowna, it's been amazing, just the amount of synchronicity and the people that I'm meeting and how things are flowing. And, sometimes selling 1 million books is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that I enjoy what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of, kick back, and I'm going to do it a little different way. So And really for me, I've always found you sell books by meeting people. And when people meet you and have a chance to get to know you, there's a lot of people that just want to support an author. They don't even buy it. They don't even read it. They're just like, oh, you're an author. Let me buy your book. I'm like, I love you. So that's where I'm at. So, you can get it on Amazon. It's great. I totally recommend it to get it on Amazon for now, and they'll ship it. And in the future, I'm just going to do a little bit different strategy through just public speaking and connecting with people directly.
It's, I'm finding this the same way with the podcast in terms of, like I have a Patreon account, but Patreon takes a good chunk, and you want to monetize this, and the systems that we have in place are taking a lot of money from us as creators, and there needs to be a bit of a different avenue for us to take the money,
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm not trying to be greedy, but we've worked hard, right? And
yeah, and because I posted online about my experience with Amazon, I had so many people email me behind the scenes and say, yeah, I've had the same experience. And a friend of mine, Darren Elf, he's out of Park City, Utah, has a website called bicycletouringpro.com, and he sells all of his ebooks off his site and does quite well. And he had Amazon issues as well. So I think, when you're talking about other authors, there's other places like iTunes, and iTunes, gives me 70% off the ebook instead of, taking 70%.
Yeah.
And that I think you have to be open to many channels, and so that it could be iTunes, and it could be Amazon, and it could be setting up books at a fair, and maybe it's speaking, maybe it's whatever. But I'm happy if one person bought my book and it helped them, I'd be like, good job, mission accomplished. Everything's butter on top of that. So it's having the most sales is not the most important. Having a book that touches people and helps people, that's more important to me.
Mm-hmm. So Amazon, you're open to book signings and public speakings and...
Yeah, absolutely. And, with the corporate speaking, I used to get all stressed out because you charge such a ridiculous amount of money for it. And I'm like, am I giving you value now? I'll just go and speak for free. I mean, if they really got to pay me, they will. But, if it's a big organization. But I like small talks. I like connecting with people directly. I like I'm doing that. But I'm open to anybody that wants to listen to me.
I feel the same way. I relate. Yeah. Well, I mean, for one of the things I'm thinking that I think would be great is, and we talked about maybe doing, we should have done it this way, but we could do a Facebook Live next time. And, there's a lot of things that we didn't cover on this podcast, more about your cycling adventures, a lot of other things that I think, allow the audience to interact a little bit too. I mean, we didn't even get a chance to talk about your interviews, your perspective on the media. I think I could see you and I doing a really interesting podcast on the current, and not in a cynical way, the current status of media, because I think you bring a huge amount of experience to that. I bring a new fresh eye to that, I guess, in a sense. And so I think that there's a lot of things that I think you and I can still talk about for other podcasts as well.
Sure. Well, and the other thing that's different. So like when the Coconut Head book, when it came out in 1996, it was a Canadian bestseller. But the way the book industry worked before is it's hot for a month and then next, kind of thing. And, I had good coverage. I had national talk shows and stuff, but it just disappears after a while. And then the book isn't carried and this and that. And I really see this as a lifelong strategy to sell my products, to build my brand, to get people to know who I am and understand who I am, instead of just trying to hit everything at once, and just slow and steady move down the path at my pace on my terms. And I'm always open to the media, and I'll go and hit some people up. But I think what I'll have to do probably is just get a van and put a giant Buddha on it and go camping forever and just meet people, and what's really nice about selling your own product is you do retain so much more money, and then you only really need to sell a couple, 3, 4, 5 books a day as opposed to hundreds or thousands to make your numbers. I mean, that first book I made $8,000 as a bestseller. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? For the amount of time and effort that it took to do that. And the second book I did much better because I self-published. But, it's still a hustle. And I'm like, you know what? I really have no interest in compromising my happiness to make a zillion book sales. I'm just going to go and plug away. And I think I haven't bought the ski pass yet, but I'm probably going to stay up in Kelowna for the winter. I had a ski pass for 20 years and usually did like 40, 50, 60 days. And then I discovered warm weather, and I've had one day of skiing in the past 13 years. So before I get too rickety and persnickety, I want to get out and ski, get some ski days in. But you sell books on the chairlift. You sell books in the lodge. I mean, I can basically make a living just going out skiing and chatting people up on the chair. So,
yes, you have that. But that's true. That's true. But I do have some connections for you too. But we'll talk about that off air.
Yep.
So how can people find you?
SmartAssBuddha.com. Come on by.
Right.
And it's also on Facebook. If you search SmartAss as one word, SmartAss Buddha, I'll show up. I should show up all over at Google. And connect with me on my Facebook personal page. That's fine for now. And if they're crazy, I get to block them, which is just fun anyways, blocking annoying people. And it is a thrill. And, if people want to contact me and reach out to me, maybe I'm totally open to speaking to kids at school or school groups or youth groups or whatever. Just send me a note, and if I can do it, I will.
All right. Awesome. And of course, find me on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. I don't hit that block button too much, but I have been known to hit it a couple times.
You have to earn a blocking.
Yeah, you have to earn your blocking. Earn your blocking, people. Earn your blocking. It's, like, agree, or disagree the podcast on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter, KEVOLE, speaker.and, KEVOLE. Subscribe on YouTube and on iTunes. YouTube, Kevin Olenek. Agree or disagree the podcast on iTunes. Thanks for joining. We are going to do this again. And
Kevin, thank you so much. If you're down here, let's go for coffee. And if up at Kamloops, we should connect and have a laugh.
All right. That sounds great. And we will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.